All right, everyone. So this session here is really for those of you who might be still lacking the big picture about the game you're supposed to develop for phase 1 and phase 2. Again, for phase 1, the due date will be next Wednesday. And to really pass the phase 1, we will only run the 15 starter tests on your submission. And today, I plan to find out, I plan to just choose maybe 2 of them to really go over with you, just to for you to get some details. I think many questions that you either ask on the forum or maybe on the Google Doc can be also covered by that as well. Okay, let me just go over the Google Doc very quickly. Okay, I also have written down the written response on the Google Doc, so I don't need to say too much. Okay, I just want to go over with you quickly. Okay, I think something about regen. Okay. We'll definitely talk about regen today, about regen for Starfighter and also the regen for enemies. We'll talk about it. Okay. And also, should you remove out of board projectiles and enemies? Yeah, it's quite clear. You should remove them, but you should still assign them the IDs. It's clearly specified in the documents. Okay. Something about scoring system. We define that in a recursive way for a reason. So I will also talk about this. I'll give you some concrete example for the scoring. Okay, are you supposed to use a state design pattern? I would say you can use any design pattern that we either have covered, or we are covering, or we will cover. Basically, starting from yesterday, you're supposed to start studying the new lecture, which will cover one more design pattern called a composite design pattern, which might still be useful. And then next week, starting from next Wednesday, we got the last design pattern to cover in the course called visitor. But I think that before next Wednesday, you'll be covered for more than enough for you, at least for phase 1. Okay, number 5. So this one is really about how you can use a random number generator. So if you go to the starter code that we gave to you, there's a project, right? It's a standalone Eiffel project. Go there, and then you will see that there's a root class over there that shows you exactly how you can use the random number generator. I'll mention also about it also today, about how you can spawn the enemies. All right, something about the rockets over here. Okay, so that's something I already have written down my response. You can have a read, a very brief response. But notice one thing here. So if you actually want to fire the rockets, it's one of the weapons. If you want to fire the rockets, notice that usually the projectile, if you fire it, it will cost energy. But this time it will cost health. So this is the only case. Just make a note of that. Okay. And then there's something, again, about the scoring system. We got a very nice diagram from one of your fellow students here. So the example I'm going to use today will be very similar, but I'll make it even more concrete for you. So you can definitely get benefits from that. All right. Okay, a very quick question over here. Can we not follow our own design pattern? Well, I would say you definitely have the freedom to do so, but well, we have to judge, right? When we actually look at your design documents, if somehow you actually have too many Superman modules in your class, and then if in a particular scenario, it's certainly applicable to use a particular pattern, but you choose not to. In that case, if you can justify well, then that'll be okay, right? So I think the design patterns that we have been teaching in the course, I think those are the common ones. So you can definitely find the applicable scenarios in the project quite obviously. But the reason that we don't really tell you which pattern you should use, because that should really be something you want to judge which one to see. But you're free to reconfirm with me maybe during the office hour if you want to show to me your design patterns. Okay, so many of your fellow students actually drop by my office hour to show me their design. I think you can also do that before the final due date for the projects. All right. Okay, so let me just go with my agenda here. Okay. My plan would be I want to go over 2 acceptance tests. Those are the long ones in your one of the 2 of the 15 test cases you were given. So I want to go over ATO11 and also ATO15. So these are the 2 test cases I want to go over. Okay. Before that, I would like to talk about a common question here. How do the enemies act? Right. So this is something I would like to talk about first. Okay, just give you some general idea. And the 2 test cases that we're going to talk about, also you can apply them already. Okay. There are two parts you have to read. Just want to make to you the reference two places. So number one is you want to go to messages.txt, and then you want to go to section 7, the enemy action. Okay. So there's something I want to show you very quickly. So if you go to that plain text file and go to section 7, enemy action over there, especially over there, you got phase 1, okay, and also you got phase 2, and also you got different cases. I'll try to make some connection to you, okay. You got case number 1, case number 2, and case number 3. And for case number 3 specifically, you got subcases. You got subcase number 3.1 and also 3.2, right? I'll get to these in just a moment. So this will be the part you want to refer to about enemy action. And then you also want to go to the PDF, so 6.13.5. So that's a phase 5 for the term. So enemy act. So this will be also something you want to go over, all right? And over here, so there is a particular, so when we talk about an enemy's action can be generalized as the following sequence of actions. So this sequence over here applies to certain cases, which we refer to in the messages.txt. So somehow that's why we say you really have to read both in order to get a complete picture, okay? And then I'll talk about them, okay? I'll get there. So let me just draw something on the iPad and I'll come back here. So you want to have the following notion about different phases for each enemy, right? I'm talking about each kind of enemy. Now for the specific details for the enemy, you will have to go to the instruction for details for enemies. Think about, we got 2 phases in general. So we got phase number 1. So phase number 1 is really about the preemptive actions. And the preemptive actions, they should be triggered by certain events or certain commands. For example, you will see that the grunt may be triggered by the fire, for example. Triggered by some events. Okay, we'll see example as we go over the acceptance test. And we also got phase 2. Okay, for phase 2, it's really to say, if you go back to the enemy, okay, let me just go back to your instruction over there. Okay, if you go to enemy, you can see this part is about the preemptive action. So every enemy might be different. And then apart from the preemptive actions, so these are the non-preemptive actions. So these are the actions that you can consider as normal actions, okay? And the normal action depends on whether the starfighter is actually seen, is not seen, or it is seen actually by the enemy. Okay, so how can you determine that? You have to look at the attributes vision of the enemy, right? Okay, so now let me just, okay, that's fine. Let me go back there. And so phase number 2, I will just call them normal actions, just non-preemptive, basically. Okay, so these are the 2 phases. Okay, so let's categorize them basically into 2 phases. So now at the runtime for each term, so there are basically 3 scenarios you have to worry about. Okay, so let me talk about it. So now think about, let me just go back to the messages.txt. So let me be corresponding, okay? So case number 1 would be preemptive action that would do not cause the enemy to end its turn. Okay, so this will be case number 1. So that means let me just say P1 and P2, just make it shorter. So that means case 1. We got 3 cases in general. So case 1, case 2, and also case 3. So case number 1 is after you have done the preemptive actions for the particular enemy, if applicable, their turns do not end. In that case, you have to follow that by phase 2, right? That's case 1, basically. All right, what about case 2? If I go back here, so what about case 2? For the preemptive action that caused enemy to end its turn, all right? So that's this case number 2. So now for case number 2, you can think about you only got the preemptive action in phase 1. After that, the turn has been ended already. Okay, so that's a case number 2. And what about case number 3? For case number 3, so basically it's like this. for case number 3, you have to think about, okay, let me just draw a little bit differently. Okay. So now you want to think about it this way. So here we simply got P1, and after P1, the turn has ended. Or another one would be simply that you simply don't have any preemptive action, and you just got P2. Okay. Guys, any questions so far about the 3 possible cases? Are we okay so far? Okay, so now let me talk about some very important stuff over here. Something about regeneration. For the enemy, you can only got the one attribute regenerated, right? Not really like for the Starfighter, you can get both the health and also energy regenerated. So now, when do you do regen? So that's the question, okay? The principle will be, you will have to do the regen at the beginning of the action. So now for case 2 and case 3, it should be quite obvious, you have to do the regen. In this case, right before the preemptive action. And in this case over here, it should be right before the normal actions. These are easy. However, for case number 1 over here, you have to do it in the, right before. You can think about in between P1 and P2. So right before the normal action. You don't do it right in the beginning over here. That's not the way to go. Okay, so this will be the regen. So this is something very important to understand conceptually. This is something kind of implied by the documents, but I just want to make it more explicit for you. Any question about these 3 cases so far? Any questions?
Professor, can you please just sort of go through this again in terms of P1, P2?
Yeah, I can do it. No problem. Yeah, I think, guys, don't be shy to really interrupt me. So I think it's really important to get this right. Okay. So think about for every enemy. Okay. For every enemy, they got preemptive actions. For example, let me just give you a concrete example. Let's talk about the grunt. You can see the grunt over here. You can think about the phase 1 for any grunt. However, phase 1 does not always happen because you can see for phase 1 for the grunt, it only happens if the Starfighter passes or if the Starfighter uses a special. These are the only we call triggering events that will cause the phase 1 to happen for a grunt, right? Okay. And then for every preemptive action, we also mention whether that particular phase is going to end that particular turn. You can see in this case, it is going to end. So that means every time, let's say for the grunt, if their preemptive action is invoked, in that case, after phase 1, they don't really continue with the phase 2. Okay, so for example, I would say grunt. All right, and then also, okay, and then let's talk about another one. Okay, let me just find out. You can see for the fighter, we also say end the fighter's turn. So that's also similar to grunt. Also, we want to say end the carrier's turn, and also interceptor. Okay, let me see this. Here, we don't have any preemptive action. Okay. I think there are some cases over here. You can just go through. Okay. So basically, another case would be over here. So maybe after phase number 1, somehow after phase number 1, the preemptive action, the turn wouldn't actually end. So that means you will still have to execute P2. We will see example actually when we go over the acceptance step. Might be easier when I get there. I will show it to you. Okay. Does that answer your question about the 3 cases?
Yes, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. So guys, I think get these cases just at a conceptual level. Just remember the timing of applying regen is really important, as we'll see. Okay, as we go through the test cases. All right. Good. Okay. For the scoring, I'll talk about scoring at the end of the acceptance test AT11. That's kind of the scoring will make more sense once we get there. But for now, let's not worry about scoring. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about AT11. So kind of do the screenshots from every possible for all the complete states. So let's just talk about it. Okay, I think it's important for you to see how the game works. That's more important. And then if there's any cross-reference that's needed, I'll try to put you back into the PDF or the messages.txt. Let me just see if there's any question here before I start this. No. So one question here about phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is the preemptive actions only. And then phase 2 is not preemptive. Phase 2 is the normal actions depending on whether the enemy is actually seen by the Starfighter. So these are different. Okay, phase 1 and phase 2. You will also see the definition in messages.txt. So Amir, if that's something you're confused about, so phase 1 and phase 2 are completely separate. Okay, for example, if you see over here, you can think about this guy over here, the preemptive action, that's phase 1. And then this is like a phase 2. And for the phase number 2 over here, there are two possible cases. Either the Starfighter is actually not seen by the enemy, or when the Starfighter is seen by the enemy. Okay, so these are the two attributes. We'll also see how these two attributes can be updated as well. Okay, and in case phase number 1 is actually executed, in that case, you're going to end the turn. In that case, you're not going to execute a normal action, right? So that's what I just said before. So even for the grunt, there might be two different cases over here. So grunt can be either you execute a preemptive action, in that case, you don't do the phase 2 anymore, according to definition. Or you simply don't have the P1 for the grunt because you simply don't have the pass, or you don't have the also the special. In that case, you would only do phase 2. Okay, so that's a distinction. Another question here from Robbie. Is it bad if we have lots of classes? I think it's kind of hard to say. I would say you don't want to really go for extreme. One extreme would be you have only a single class or a very small number of classes. In that case, every class tends to be a Superman module. You don't want that. That's not really satisfying modularity. On the other hand, you don't necessarily have to put every 5 or 6 lines of code into a separate class. That's also overkill. So I would say a balance is needed. Yeah. So if you have a special scenario you want me to check for you, you can get in touch, or just speak to the TA. Either way. All right. All right. Let's now go over these. Okay. So you can see this is right after the software has been executed. Right. Now we just started that, and then the first one to really understand is the play. Okay. As you know, the first two number is going to be 5 rows and 17 columns, right? And then what about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? What about these 5 numbers? Okay, I'm just going to go just tell you where you should look at, and then I'll tell you the examples over here. So we got 2 examples today, one from this test, the other one from AT015. The part you want to look at is this. We also got nice examples there to show you. Okay. So you want to go to, I believe, the important commands. Okay, so some commands to know. Okay, you want to go to basically page number 8. Okay, page number 8, and then over here at the top, we talk about the different thresholds. You can see N1, N2, N3, N4, N5. So the first one is has to do with the threshold for N1, which is for generating grunt. And the second one for fighter, the third one for carrier, and the interceptor and pylon, etc. Right? So I will leave you to read over these 2 examples, but I'm just going to give you different examples right now. Okay, let's go back there. So now let's talk about this particular case. You can see over here, since we gave to you 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, accordingly, these are the 2. These are the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are the 6. Ranges we have. Okay, so now you can see the first one is going to be from 1 until 2. The second one is going to be from 2 to 2. The third one from 2 to 2 here, and the next one 2 to 2 here, and the next one 2 to 2 here, and the next one 2 to 101. Okay, so that's why we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. These ranges. I want to make sure everybody's okay converting these 5 numbers into these 6 ranges. Anybody having trouble with this? You can just ask me to explain again. I want to make sure everybody understand what ranges we have. Of course, some of them are empty. Okay, everybody's okay? All right. So what's going to happen is this. In phase number 7 for the turn, it's called the enemy spawning. over there, we're going to generate 2 random numbers. So the only occasion you have to generate number is at the end of each turn. And every time you generate the random numbers for the turn, you generate exactly 2 numbers. Okay. In the instruction, we simply say I and also J. So I has to do with the real number, because always when you spawn a new enemy, it's always at the last column. We'll see example. And then so this one is about which row and the last column, the intersection, basically. Okay, and the second number over here is really going to be to generate between 1 and 100. It's going to be a random number. Okay, and a random number there. For example, if I happen to choose, for example, 5. In that case, 5 falls into this particular region over here. So that means for this particular turn, we do not spawn any enemy. Okay, and look at that. The way we actually arrange these numbers, you can such that you can see only this range over here is non-empty. And more precisely, it contains only one number over here, just number 1, right? Remember in your calculus class, this is the inclusive range interval, right? And this will be the exclusive, right? Just make sure you understand that, all right? So only this and also this. And this one here is basically going to be any number between 2 and 100. Any number that's in this particular range, that means we don't spawn. So that's the last range. Okay, on the other hand, you can see all these ranges over here. So 2, right, is empty, right? It's inclusive 2 and also exclusive 2. It's as if no number can be satisfied in the range. Okay, and this is empty, this is empty, this is empty. That simply means we do not generate for this particular play, right? Once you launch this particular game, you do not spawn at the end of each turn any fighter, any carrier, any interceptor, or any pylon. If there's any enemy that's going to be generated, when the generated number is exactly equal to 1, you're going to generate the grunt. Any other number that's in between 2 and 100, so that means we don't generate any, we don't spawn any enemy at the end of at the current turn. Any questions so far about this one here? That's the only thing I want to mention for this first command about using the play. Any question? Anybody?
So when you're entering 101 with an exclusive brackets, can you just not enter 100 with inclusive brackets?
Yes, absolutely. So the question was over here. Okay, it's already covered. So what I wrote over there was 2 and also 101. I put it exclusive over here. So you can think about it's equivalent to if I put 2 and then 100 inclusive. They're the same since we talk about integers.
Okay.
They're the same, yes. To be more precise, I think when you actually want to use the random number generator, the random generator class we gave to you, I believe they are inclusive. You can look at the root class. It has proper documentation. I believe you would simply say rChoose. For example, in this case, you're going to say whatever, depending on which let's say we talk about how I can generate J. You'll simply say between 1 and 100. That's what you have to do. All right. Okay.
Professor, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
When you say turn, like what does turn specifically refer to?
Okay,
like,
good. That's a good question here. Okay, that's a good question. A turn, by definition, let's just go back to instruction. So every time if you forget about the detail, that's absolutely fine. I forget about the detail all the time, so I need to refer to the PDF. So you want to go to basically over here, a turn of the game. Just go to 6.13 over here. The first sentence, a turn occurs when the move, pass, fire, or special command is invoked. That's the beginning. That's the definition of a turn. To be more precise, over here, let me go back to the iPad here. Basically, you can think about if this is the acceptance test supplied by the user. If somehow, of course, they might say play, with all the proper argument value over here, like the one we exemplified, and then as soon as you say, for example, pass, okay, you can see pass is simply one of the commands that's going to trigger a turn. You can think about that's going to trigger the very first turn, and then if I got maybe after that, I'm going to say move the Starfighter into maybe A2, for example. So that will trigger the second turn. So any of these commands will actually trigger. So what should you do? I can tell you precisely. What you should do is, remember every time we want to do something with the user input, we have to deal with the corresponding abstract UI command class. So now, for example, for the pass, you will have to go to the ETF pass class. And then there is a routine command over there called pass, I believe. And then in this case, it doesn't take any parameters. And then, so over here, of course, you may have to do some error handling, but this is the place to trigger a turn in the model cluster. So there should be some routines that's in the model cluster that should really define the relevant commands for doing that in the model cluster. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, just one point to clarify. So that means technically, so when we play the game, so when we invoke the play command from our UI, we generate our Starfighter, but we don't generate the, like in this case, grunt yet.
Not yet. Yes, good question. So let's go back here. You're basically asking this. So let's see. You can see this is the post states after the play, right? At this point, the turn has not even started. Has not. You can see this after the play. This is the setup stage, right? We are supposed to choose. Basically, we are supposed to choose all the the weapon, the armor, the engine, and etc. Once we go into the in-game states, we go to enter some commands, and it should be one of the move, pass, or fire, and those are going to trigger the turn. I will explicitly mention that when I get to the acceptance test.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, basically what we have shown so far, we haven't reached your turn just yet. So far, after the play, you basically go into the setup stage, and in the setup stage, you're supposed to say setup back, setup next, and also setup select. That's something you will do. And for today, I'm not going to focus too much on that setup state because that one is more rather straightforward. I want to focus more about the interaction between the enemies. Okay. Okay, so some quick question over here. Is the number is a random number generated every turn? Yes, Robbie. More specifically, phase number 7 of the turn at the end of the turn. And at the end of each turn, you have to generate exactly 2 numbers. Okay. And then it's the same number used every turn. No, you got to generate a pair of new random numbers every turn. If the enemy generated is random, then how to test it with Oracle? Okay, so this is also answered in the forum. You don't need to really understand the exact technical details, but let me mention quickly. So the random number generator we have, let me put it here. So the random number, okay, RNG actually, okay, that's how the abbreviation we use. It's called deterministic random number generator. Deterministic here is very important. You can think about if you're going to, for every acceptance test that we're going to run on your code, we're going to use the random number generator, let's say with this particular input sequence, with the intervals. And then this is going to be, let's say, the sequence that's going to be run on Oracle. If we try to run the same acceptance test on your code, we're also going to run the same sequence on your code, which uses the same random number generated classes. In that case, it's guaranteed, so they are pairwise equal. So that's how we're going to test your code. Okay, you can think about the deterministic random number generator as long as you're using the same interval in the right timing, it's going to give you the same number. So that's how we test. For that, you don't have to worry. So whenever you believe that the numbers generated by your program is different from the Oracle, you're simply not using a random number generator in the right timing. For example, maybe use a random number generator not at the end of the turn, or maybe you're not really using that exactly twice each turn. So that could cause some discrepancies. All right. All right, good. Okay, so everybody seems to be okay. Okay, let me just, the only thing I want to talk about for the setup stage is about how you can aggregate the parts. I think we answered this question quite a few times already in the forum, but I just want to summarize quickly for everybody. So let's say this. If you simply say setup next 5, so you can think about initially you're simply in the not started states, and then once you get to the setup stage, you got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and etc. So when you say setup next, you're basically saying I'm going to jump all the way to the states over here called in-game states conceptually, right? That's what we're doing. Okay, that's something I assume you know already. Okay, so now once we get there, so what should be the attribute values when you first go into the game? It's simply going to be a summation of all the parts you have chosen. Okay, if you go to AT011, for that one there, since we simply skip all the way to the in-game states right away, so that means every equipment has been chosen the default option. Okay, so what do I mean? Okay, so over here you can see for, let's say for weapon, so the default option would just be standard. Okay, and then for armor, the default option would just be none. So these are all the extracts from your messages.txt. So that's something you should really refer to. Okay, and then also for the engine, it's going to be just standard. Okay, and then also we got a power for the special. Okay, let's talk about just for example. So these are, since we simply say set up next. So all the default options are chosen, like the ones I'm highlighting. Let's see how we can calculate. So your program is supposed to somehow aggregate all of them together. For example, let's say for health, you're going to add 10 plus 50 plus 10. So that's how you get 70. So that's the maximum health you can get. Let me do one more. What about energy? You got 10 plus 0 plus 60. So that's also 70 over here. And then over here in the very first turn, you're actually going to simply fill out the current health and also the current, the current health and also the current energy to be the maximum. That's what you would do. Okay, any questions so far? Guys, any question?
Professor?
Go ahead.
What's the first 70 again?
What's the health? You mean this one here?
Yes, so there are two
okay,
70s.
Yeah, sure.
Can you re-explain the first one, please?
No problem, Sam. So Sam's question is, okay, so this guy over here, this is so-called the total health. You can think about the maximum you can get. And then also the 70 over here, this is the current one. So for example, if there's a collision between the Starfighter and also the maybe with the enemy, in that case, you will have to change the current health value. If the current health goes below 0 or just to 0, in that case, the game is over because the Starfighter is destroyed. Okay, make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. All right. So guys, do you have any question about the setup stage over here? I don't really want to spend too much time on this stage, but if you do have question, you're free to ask if you want to right now. I just want to show you how you can aggregate just about the health, energy. You can do something similar for the regen as well. Okay, and don't forget for the regen over here for Starfighter, the first one is to regen for the health, and the second one is to regen using for the energy. We'll see that. So it's these are the bits and pieces you have to just remember. All right. All right. Everyone seems to be okay. Maybe up to the setup stage. Okay. All right. So now let's start. Okay. Let me just tell you the convention I'm going to follow. I'm going to make the notes available to you if that's useful for you to study the scenario that's in these two test cases. So every slide, I'm going to put two states together. You can think about this is the pre-states, and this is the command, for example, move, and this is the post states. So everything together corresponds to exactly what AT011 is that we made available to you. Okay, just so you don't get lost. All right, so now let's talk about it. Okay, let's say this. Let's say before we execute move and then A1, before we do that, So this is the pre-states, where we simply got all the attribute values aggregated. Okay, and then we also got a Starfighter simply in this particular position, right? Okay, so that's fine. So now let's see how we can do a move. Okay, if you want to do a move, what you want to do is you want to, whenever you move, you have to reduce the energy. Okay, so now how exactly do you reduce it? So you want to know how many units you have moved. So you can see over here, you're basically trying to move from S into A1. So this is where you want to move to, right? You can see in the post states, you have moved to A1. In this case, it's simply no collision just yet, right? So there will be basically 2 units. And what about the cost for every unit? You have to look at the move cost. So this is one of the attributes. So that's why you'll say 3 times 2. And then you start with the maximum energy of 70. So you would say 70 minus this. So you get 64. So that's why you got 64 exactly over here for the energy. Any question about updating the energy about the move? Okay, the formula is very simple, but it's also explicitly mentioned in the instruction. I just wouldn't go there. It's kind of like a simple case. For the more complicated interaction, I will go back to the PDF and read it together with you. All right. Okay, so now that's about it. So now we are now at the end of the first turn. Okay, you can see now the move itself is actually triggering a turn. Remember what I said before, right? You remember the definition, either a move or a pass or a fire. Either of the 3 commands is going to trigger a turn. So now for this turn over here, it's very easy. We simply just do the, okay, there's some details I'm omitting here. Otherwise it will take forever for us to go through. Let me say this. Something you have to make sure your program does is like this. Okay, I'll just mention that here. Whenever in your code, so whenever either move or pass or fire actually triggers a new turn, for your new turn, you should always do phase number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Always these 7 phases. However, in my case over here, I only in my demonstration, I only show you the important phases that's going to make a change. For example, you can see at the moment, there is simply no friendly projectile. There's also no enemy projectile. Also, there's no enemy just yet. So that means for phase 1 and phase 2, it will be as if I did nothing. But for your routine, you still have to define them so you can execute the cases in general. Okay, that's the point I'd like to first to make. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about something very important about the enemy spawning. Okay. So enemy spawning over here, as I mentioned before, is going to be phase number 7. Okay, phase number 7 of the. So now let's talk about specifically for the first term. Okay, enemy spawn. So now at the end of the first term, you're going to say 1 and also the number of rows. In this case, how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is going to be 5. And also the second number is going to be some random number between 1 and 100. Okay. And then you can definitely look at P17 for instruction. You can look at that yourself. All right. And then, so this is a very important property over here. Some of you actually asked about if the, okay, actually also relevant to what you just asked. If the numbers are generated randomly, how can we spawn the enemy for testing? Okay, so 2 parts to the answer. Number 1, you have to play with the parameters over here, the threshold over here, in a way that, for example, you will only generate grunts. You can tune the ranges specifically so that you only generate fighter. So that's how you can generate fighter. Or you can tune the ranges specifically so that it only generates carrier and etc. So you will see that later. Okay, you'll see that also a different version. Okay, so that's aspect number 1. Let me write it down over here for you. So now for testing purpose, so there are 2 things you have to keep in mind. Okay, number 1, so tune the threshold value for the enemy. Okay, and number 2, you have to make sure the first term, the property for the random number generator. The property of the random number generator. Okay, for that one, I'm going to just refer you to the code over here quickly. Okay, just give me 1 moment. Let me just open the starter code. I want to show you where the comment is. Okay, let me go to the spec folder and then Space Defender. Okay, and then I'll go to, okay, so that's your starter folder. Okay, let me go into starter code. And then if you look at the root class over here, okay, the root class basically say that you're gonna call random.rchoose, right, over here. Okay, so every time when you call the random.rchoose, the very first 2 times you call the random number generator, it's always going to return the number, the minimum of the intervals. Always. So what does that mean? If you think about it, over here, this will explain why this particular enemy grunt, over here, you can see that's the ID. So that's the, okay, over here. So this is the ID for the enemy, and that's the type of the enemy, is a grunt. So now why is that particularly over here? The location is simply A and then 17. It is because it's the very first turn. And then since it's the very first turn, we're calling the random number generator. So now this is also just going to return 1. And also this is just going to return 1 as well. So that means we're going to generate, first of all, the location. The location would just be the first row, which is A. And also it's always the last column, which is 17. So that's about the first number. So what about over here? So now the 1 over here, remember how we tuned the enemy, the threshold. If you go back here, we turn the ranges over here such that when you generate the number 1, it's going to give you the grunt, right? So we pretty much know for the very first turn, a grunt will be spawned. Okay, so you can actually use that facts about the random number generator to control what enemy is going to be generated. Okay, so that's important facts for you to know in order to do testing. Okay, so this part here is telling you you're going to generate a grunt. All right, so that's about the first term. So we just really about the spawning the enemy over here. Okay, so it's actually spawn over here, and also we talk about how you can actually move by 2 units. Okay, so the resulting units, resulting positions over here. Okay, guys, any question about the first term? Any question before I move on? We'll do entity interaction in a moment, very soon. Some of you were asking about how to implement the fog of war feature, right? So that one is when you are not in the debug mode, right? You know what? I think I don't need the. I can just let me delete this page over here. I think I can just refer to a particular page for you. Okay, let me just do that. Okay, I assume everybody's okay. Let me just talk about this since it's asked on the chat. Okay, let me go there. Okay, apparently this is when you have the debug mode. And this is the fog of war over here. All right, so now let's take a look at this. It's on page number 6. And then over here, you can see the vision is about 13, right? How can you really generate a board so that it's going to put a question mark accordingly, right? Let's just go over the idea. It's very strict. I didn't say, well, it's not too difficult to implement this. Think about this is the position for the Starfighter, right? Over here. So now if you, basically vision means you can view all the entities within 13 spaces, which means within 13 spaces, you don't need to put any question mark. Okay, for example, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So far, it's still within the visible range, right? So there's no question mark. But now you can see if this particular slot over here is actually about 14 spaces in the distance. That means so that's why anything beyond this particular question mark will just be invisible to the Starfighter. And also remember this part over here is about 12, right? And the distance can be either vertical or horizontal. So now up to here, where my cursor is, this is 12. So I can still go up or down, either up 1 or down 1. So that will still be within the visible range for 13. I can see if I go this part over here, this place over here, where my cursor is, this will be 13. So that means if I go, maybe either go to the right by 1, or if I go up by 1, it will be invisible again. So visually, that's how you can understand the fog of war. But how you implement it, you just have to calculate the distances between every slot from the Starfighter. If that's already outside the range, outside the vision, in that case, you have to put a question mark. All right, so that's just an answer to one of the chat questions. All right, so let me now go back to over here. Let's talk about the next one. We don't have to add a regen over here. Okay. That's a good question here. There is regen over here. So I may not really remember to add a regen. I'm not really executing the algorithm in my mind. So the question is, should we actually somehow do regen over here? Yes, we do. Think about regen happens before every action. So this applies to both the enemy, which I already talked about when you do the regen, and also for the Starfighter, before the move, before the pass, or before the fire, you have to do the regen first. That happens before every action of the Starfighter. You have to. Let's talk about this particular case. Okay, so now let's see. You can see the energy. This is how you should think of it. Okay. You can see the first of all the health. The health over here is already 70, right? And then you can see the regen is actually 1. However, 70 is already the maximum of the total health. So we don't really add 1 to it. So there is a rule in the PDF. If the current health is already its maximum, we don't do any regen. It simply has no effects. Okay? So the regen over here has no effects. And similarly, for the energy over here, oh, there's something very important. Actually, that's good that you remind me. So for the energy over here, we also have to do the regen before we do the movement. So that means, can we do any regen to 70 over here by 3? The answer is no, because 70 is already the maximum. So we're not going to add the 3 over here for regen. That also has no effects. So you have to be very careful over here, guys. It's a very important here. So when you do regen, it has to be before you do the effects for the movement. Because if you didn't do it, let's say somehow you can see the math over here. So I started with the energy over here 70. If I try to say I try to reduce, so the move cost is actually 3. I move by 2 spaces, and then it's going to be simply 64, right? That's the correct answer. However, if you do the regen right now by the 3 units over here, which will be 67. If you simply put 67 over here, that's actually wrong. So that's the wrong timing of doing the regen. Regen has to be in the very beginning, all right? In this example, would the ground have a 1 out of 1, like a 1% chance of spawning? Yeah, exactly. Let me just go back here. Yes, exactly. Because in total, every time the number is going to be between 1 and 100, only number 1 is going to be generated. That's correct. All right. Just want to show it to you. All right. I assume no question here. Okay, let's now go back to, go to the next one. All right. All right, the next one here. So let's go to the next one. So this is the resulting state from the previous term. Okay, so now let's say we want to do fire. Okay, fire. And then again, as I said before, you have to do regen first. But now in this case, are we going to have any effects for the regen? The answer is yes, we're going to have effects. So that's why I plan to talk about regen only from here. But in the previous one, we also have regen, but I simply just have no effects. But now we do. Okay, let's talk about it. So now we want to do this one over here. So you can see I said energy regen. We want to do it before we do fire. So what about the health regen? You can see the health currently is actually the maximum 70. So that means applying the regen of 1 has no effect. So that remains to be 70. What about energy? For the energy, you can see currently it's actually 64 from the previous term, right? So now for 64, we have to apply the regen, which is 3. So that will give us 67. Okay, that's after the regen. So 67 is the intermediate value, all right? And then, so now let's see what we should do. We should now do a fire. And if you want to do a fire, the cost of the fire depends on the weapon you actually chose in the setup stage. And remember, in this case, we simply chose the default one. So the cost will simply just be 5. Okay, so that means we're going to say 67 after the regen, we're going to subtract the cost of the firing. So that will give us 62. So this is why after the firing, the energy will be simply 62. Okay, any question about calculating this energy over here? We want to apply the regen before we can subtract. All right. Okay, and then, so now we want to see how the enemy is going to act, right? I'll get to the some attribute, for example, like a seen by Starfighter and also can see Starfighter. So these are attributes your algorithm or your routine should also update every time. But since for this particular turn, they wouldn't change. So that's why I don't mention about them. But I will talk about when they actually make a difference. Okay, but for your algorithm, you should always cover them for sure. Okay, so now let's talk about the grunt. Okay, so now how should the enemy be behave? Okay, let me just talk about again this one specifically. Okay, it's really important to know what should be present. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go to the grunt, the enemy. Okay, let me just go to the grunt over here. Okay, you can see the grunt over here. Grunt, by definition, it will be triggered by the fire. Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon. Let me say it again. By definition, the grunt can only be triggered by either pass or a special. And currently, we're doing a fire. So that means grunt will not trigger any preemptive action. So what should you do? So now it depends on whether the Starfighter is actually seen by the enemy or not, right? So that's something we have to decide. So before I talk about it, let me just go back there. So now think about where the grunt is. You can see the grunt is exactly over here, right, from the pre-states, right? So now can this? So you can see. Let me just go back there. The attribute name. Okay, you can see we have to check to see whether the Starfighter is actually seen or not seen. Okay, it turns out it's not seen. It's not. Okay, because you can see the Starfighter is actually very far away. It's basically here, right? You can also see. Can see Starfighter is simply just false, right? So that's why we have to actually apply the this case over here. So what should we do? When it's not seen, we have to do this particular action over here. We have to move 2 spaces to the left, and then after the moving, if the grunt is still on the board, and then we have to fire a projectile, you know, and etc. Okay? So that's the paragraph we can read. Okay, let me show you exactly what's going to happen over here on the board. So what's going to happen is this. So now this particular grunt, since there's no preemptive action, so it is going to move 2 spaces to the left over here. It's going to move to here. So that's why in the resulting state, you can see the grunt is over here, and also it's going to fire a projectile, enemy projectile. That's why you can see the less than sign, and then to its left. Okay, and then let's see confirm some outputs over here. That's also important. So now let's see this. First of all, you can see now how many projectiles have we got. This one here is also important because you can see the Starfighter, since you say fire, so it's always going to fire to its right because it's not a standard. It's not a standard. You can look at the weapon type to see, depending on, for example, if you choose a rocket, in that case, the fire pattern could be different. So this is the projectile fired by the Starfighter. So this corresponds to this projectile over here. Okay, that one is done first. And then when we do the enemy action, this particular grunt is also going to fire this enemy projectile. So that one there is going to be this projectile over here. Okay, A14. And then let's see this. And this line over here simply say the Starfighter fires at location A1 and then simply fire a friendly projectile at A2, right? That's exactly what it says. Okay, guys, any question? All right, so let me say one more thing over here. So what about the enemy action over here? I kind of put a special note over here about, it's really about phase 2. Okay, sorry. It's really about phase 2. So you can relate this to what I just explained in the beginning. So because there was no preemptive action by the ground, so that means we only got phase number 2 to actually worry about. So now in that case, you can think about it's like a no preemptive action. We simply just got P2. So now in the beginning of P2, we're going to apply the regen. However, is it going to have any effects though? Let's think about, but for your algorithm, you have to decide. Let's see this. For the ground, you can see it's exactly over here. You can see the current health is already actually 100 is the maximum. So applying the regen 1 has no effects. For regen. Okay, so that's why you can see the for the enemy the health remains to be 100. Okay. All right, so these are basically the phases that will actually make a difference for this particular turn. That's why I put them here. Okay. Any question? Let me take a look at over here.
Sorry, Professor,
yeah, question? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Are we not, because fire is another command that triggers a turn.
Correct.
So are we not generating another grunt?
Very good question. Very good question. Let me answer this right away. You're basically wondering why an enemy was not spawned, right? Okay, let me just say this. So of course there should be an enemy spawning follow after this. I'm glad you asked. The reason is because you look, remember the number, remember the range over here. For this particular play that we initiated in the beginning, if it is 1, we're going to generate grunt. However, if it is not 1 or anything else from 2 to 100, we simply don't spawn. Remember, we're now already at the end of the second turn. It just happened that the random number generated is simply in this particular range. That means there's no enemy spawned.
Oh, okay.
It's a very good question. I'm glad you asked. Yeah, good. All right, guys, it's also one of you also observed there's only a 1% chance of generating an enemy, and there must be a grunt. The 99%, the rest will just be no enemy will be spawned. So I just didn't mention that. Okay, good. Okay, I can put it as notes over here. Simply no enemy this turn. Okay, let me read a question over here. If preemptive action is taken, then regen will be applied before the preemptive action. No, that's not the case. You have to, again, go back to this particular case over here, right? If the preemptive action is actually taken, so there are two cases. Either this particular preemptive action end the turn. In that case, the regen will be applied. If the preemptive action you took did not end the turn, in that case, the regen will be applied right before the subsequent phase 2. Ovik, is that okay? I think that's your confusion, right? Very good. So guys, I know that it's sophisticated. That's why I think that you really want to just keep referencing the right notes or documents, okay? So this diagram is very important. That's gonna save you some time. Okay, Shufan, preemptive actions are only executed if the Starfighter does a specific action. Yes. Is there an efficient way to communicate what action Starfighter did? Okay, as I said before, for example, okay, so something about preemptive action. Thinking this way. Just like when I say whenever there's a pass, so that means we're going to trigger a turn. So you should really do the relevant operation over here inside the pass under ETF pass, right? So similar idea, for example. Let's say over here, if you got, for example, play, and also maybe special. special whatever, right? I don't think it takes any argument, I forgot, but anyway, that is special. And the special over here is going to trigger a grunt, right? So that means in the corresponding ETF special, and then you got the special over here. That'll be the relevant command. And now in this particular fragment of code, you are supposed to trigger preemptive action. Preemptive action of grunt. That's what you should do. So Shifan, is it okay? Okay, you said, oh, so I suppose you got it. All right. All right, so let's now, no, actually ETF classes are very, very useful. ETF classes are for two things. Error handling is one of them. The other one is whatever user input that's passed, you can definitely pass that into the model cluster. So these are the two cases that we mentioned in the tutorial video. So hopefully this time you'll get it. All right. So there are two purposes for each ETF command class. Number one, error handling. Number two, you should really call the relevant model commands or queries whenever you get to that particular context, right? For example, here. So in that case, you should really trigger some preemptive action for the grunt. All right. Okay, let's move on.
Sir?
Yes, question.
The preemptive action is in phase 5, but why should we trigger it in phase 3? Because between them, there's a enemy vision update phase. Right.
So here you can think about like this. Of course, for my demo, I try not to really go, phase by phase. That will be too time consuming. Thinking this way, what's happening over here is thinking this way. Let's say, let me just put this structure over here. You can see that we are basically saying we are trying to do a fire, right? You can think about a fire is going to be executed in phase number 3, okay? And then after phase number 3, you're going to update the enemy version, enemy vision. And then when you are in phase number 5, you basically go over all the enemies in phase number 5. For those whose preemptive actions are triggered, you're going to do them first. After all the enemies whose preemptive actions are triggered are done, and then you can go to the second phase, if any. Does that answer your question?
Means during the phase 5, we have to do the preemptive action
Correct.
first?
Yes, you do the preemptive action in phase 5, not in phase 3.
Okay.
So think about, we are trying to go very sequential order, right? So phase number 3 is only about Starfighter. And then phase number 5 will be about the enemy, in which case we can divide into 2 phases.
One more question. When we do the phase 5, do we do the preventive action for every enemy? Then
you only do, okay, so think about the current turn. The current turn is triggered either by pass or by move or by fire. So you will have to decide that particular events that trigger the current turn, which enemies will be triggered for their preemptive action. Not every enemy, only a particular kind of enemy. For example, if you go back to the enemy over here, for example, I'll just give you some example. Okay, you have to read this detail over here. For example, let's say if the current, if the command that triggers the current turn is pass, for example, in that case, it will trigger the grunt, right? It's by definition, they will be triggered by passes. However, would it trigger fighter? No, it wouldn't, because fighter is only triggered by fire, not by pass.
yes, my question is how about the action? Do we do the action after all the preemptive action?
Well, action, as I said before, right? Action, you can think about action is really phase 2 over here, right? You can see actions here is phase 2, right? So you have to see for that particular preemptive action, if that's triggered, will that end the turn? If that will end the turn, it's going to be this case. If that does not end the turn, it's going to be this case, in which case you have to execute the action.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so again, guys, please, this diagram here is really important. I don't mind repeating today, but hopefully you get the point. Okay, so for every kind of enemy, your program should explicitly encode, number one, what kind of events, either fire move or pass can trigger their preemptive action. Not necessarily every kind of enemy, but only a particular kinds of enemy. And then if a particular enemy's preemptive action is triggered, they may or may not end the turn. If they did not end the turn, that means you're going to have phase number 2, the normal action. If their preemptive action end the turn, it's going to be just that phase 1 only. Okay, that's if the preemptive actions are handled in the ETF, no, I'm not saying, I'm just saying the preemptive action should be triggered from the ETF classes. So how exactly that should be, once you trigger that, for example, over here, let's say if the preemptive action for grunt is actually triggered by the passes, in that case, maybe from ETF pass, you're going to somehow try to update your model so that the health and also total health for the grunt is going to be incremented, right? That's going to be what you got to do, all right?
Sir, a more specific case. If I have enemy A and B, and the B is triggered by the preemptive action, and what is the sequence of the action? Like, do we have to do because A has a smaller ID than B, so actually A should be act before B, but if the preemptive action is triggered on B, then what is the sequence of action?
So let's say you got enemy A, and also you got enemy B. Let's say it's 1 and 2, for example, the ID, right? Okay. Yeah. And then let's say the current one, I'm just making some example. Let's say the current command is actually move, for example.
Sir, I can see your note.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. I forgot.
Thank you.
Okay, you can see we got enemy A, we got enemy B over here, right? So they got IDs 1 and 2. So the idea would be you want to handle the enemies in the sequence of 1 and 2. However, let's say the current turn is triggered by the move, okay? By the move. So now let's say the move triggers preemptive action of, for example, B. Let's say, right? So in that case, what you would do is you will have to, the sequence will be, you will have to execute B's preemptive action. Do that first, okay? And then so now whether you're going to execute a normal action for B or not depends on whether their preemptive action will end the turn. It depends, right? So let's say assuming that B's preemptive action does not end the turn. And now we're going to go through the order by the ID over here. So now you're going to follow this by A's action, normal action, non-preemptive, and also B's action. Okay, is it clear to you?
Yeah, this is clear. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right. All right, so guys, I tried to answer everything here. Okay, so I think everything's been covered. All right. So we're saying that this one here only triggers the preemptive action for B. So that's why you're going to execute B's preemptive action first. And then after that, assuming that B's turn has not ended. So now you're going to execute A's action here because you got smaller ID, and then you got execute B. All right? Okay, so now let me go back here. Okay. All right, let me go to the next one. Okay, I think that we were here. Okay. Okay, so now we are okay. So now so far there's no interaction just yet about the movement. So we'll do that. Okay. So now we're only after the fire. Okay. So now let's go to here. Okay. The next stage. So let's see now. So now we got the interaction will now be a little bit more sophisticated. So we're going to follow this order particularly, right? We're going to follow this. Okay. We're gonna move all the projectiles, but of course, according to your instruction, you should really move the friendly projectile phase 1 first. But I'm just gonna move just for illustration. I'll move them just together. Okay. projectile move, and then followed by, before the starfighter can move, you have to do energy regen, okay? And then you gotta do the move by one space. You basically move from A1 into A2, okay? And then after that, you may want to update the enemy vision, okay? And also, because the current one is actually simply just a move, so the grunt is not going to be triggered, right? So there's no preemptive action performed by the grunt. They will just do the normal action. And now when they do their normal action, you should really do some regen and then do their normal action, all right? And then finally, you just have to update the enemy vision again, and then possibly to regen, to really spawn the enemy, all right? Okay, that's kind of the overview of this particular turn. Let's see one by one. So now let's do the first one. Let's see how the projectile are going to move over here. Okay, let's look at the projectile we have. We got this projectile over here. That's a friendly projectile. We also got this projectile over here. It's a enemy projectile. And exactly how they move, you can definitely look at the definition there. Okay, I'm going to refer you to that. But you can definitely see something very useful. You can see this particular star at A2. That one there is going to move 5 units at a time, right? So that means it's going to move to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be around here, right? That's why you will see that over here in the resulting state is exactly here, okay? And then what about the enemy projectile? It's now in A14 over here, and now when the grunt actually fire a projectile, it's going to move to the left by 4 spaces. You can look up the definition here. It's on the instruction. So that means it's going to move to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to move to exactly here. So that's why you see the resulting state over here. Okay? Hopefully, so far it makes sense. And then, so that's about the projectile moves. Let me see if I missed anything. And then if you look at the resulting states, it's going to show the new position for the 2, projectile A7 and also A10, right? These 2. And also, we're going to talk about their action because they simply moves autonomously, right? So one is from A2 to A7. That's exactly what I just illustrated, from A2 to A7. The other one is from A14 to A10. So from A14 to A10, right? All right, so far so good. Okay, I hope. And then we're going to do some energy regen over here. So what about energy regen? Let's see over here. You can see the current energy from the previous state is simply 62, and the regen should be 3. So that's why we're doing similar math over here. So it's going to be 65 after the regen. And then we're going to move the Starfighter because it's not a Starfighter's act. So now if you want to move one space, which means you're going to move from A1 to A2. So going to A1 to A2, but notice that we don't have a collision here because the friendly projectile has already moved in the previous phase. So that means it's going to move from A1 to A2, so that's exactly over here. So what will be the cost? So each unit cost is going to be 3. So 3 times 1, and then you do the math, is going to be 62. All right, so that's the resulting energy for the Starfighter. All right. Okay, so now let's talk about the enemy action, okay? And of course, you can see for the Starfighter, you will see exactly what's happening over here, right? This line here, going from A1 to A2, right? Just 1 unit, okay? And don't forget, you have to also update the enemy vision, okay? Let me just remind you. So this will be the only time I'm going to talk about the vision over here specifically, because this is the only time you will change the value. But if you look at the overall picture over here, you can see that it's going to be enemy vision updates. You should do the enemy vision updates after the Starfighter has acted, and also do the updates after all the enemies have acted. Think about these are like a discrete sequential phases you have to do. All right. Okay. So now let me go back. Okay. So now let's see why over here. Let's now update the enemy vision over here. So you can think about the enemy still remains to be here. They haven't moved just yet. But remember, the Starfighter has already moved to over here, right? So now, can they be seen by the Starfighter? So that's a question. Can it be seen? So you have to check the vision over here. The vision is simply just 13 by for the Starfighter's vision will be 13. So let's see this. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, right? So the Starfighter can exactly see the ground, right? So that's why you can see that this particular attribute has been updated to true. So that means when you actually want to update the enemy vision, you will have to check for these two attributes separately. One is about whether the enemy can be seen within the vision of the Starfighter, and the other one is simply the symmetric one. Can the Starfighter be seen by the enemy within the enemy's vision, basically, right? So these are the two. All right, let me just talk about the, I'm done with this. Let me now talk about how the enemies are going to act. Because right now it's actually the move. So that means the ground is not going to be preempted. So now what we should do is we should really go for just phase 2, only the phase 2. And now before the phase 2, we actually have to do the regen. Okay, for regen. So how do we do the regen for the enemy? We only do the regen for the health, but you can see that the health has been the maximum already. So applying 1 to the maximum has no effects. Right, so that's why you can see the regen remains to be 100, right? So just that, the cases that we gave to you, it just happened that after you apply the regen, it has no effects, but there might be some cases later that might have an effect. So you have to make sure you also implement that, at least for phase 2, right? For phase 1, again, we only run the 15 test cases on your submission to make sure at least the basics can be covered. Okay, and then what about the movements, okay? So now, because we still have this particular attribute to be false, so that means we're going to just move the ground, right? You can look at the instruction. It's actually going to move from this position over here by 2 units over here. Okay, it's going to be here. So that's why you see exactly over here. And also it's going to fire a projectile, enemy projectile to its left, right? So that's why you can see from the enemy, for the enemy, you can see it moves from A15 to A13, right? Exactly A13, the end position here. And also you will fire an enemy projectile that's going to be over here. And notice that this particular enemy projectile that's new, sorry, not here. This particular enemy projectile with ID -3, I forgot to highlight. It's exactly over here. You can think about this projectile, you can see we sort by their ID. So this one here is fired by the ground during phase 2. All right, guys, so that's about what I want to say about this particular term. Any question? Anybody? Before I move on, since we got, I will hope to at least finish this particular acceptance test, and then for ATO 15, we'll see. But let's at least finish this one first to be complete. I might run over time a bit, but if you got questions, I will answer. Anybody? Okay, so far, any question before I move on? I think so far you already see, we haven't seen any collision just yet, but I can already see how things move around, right? And also about preemptive action. I think that's the most important thing to clarify. Okay, let me move on to the next turn. Yes, next turn, yes. Okay, so now we got 3 more to talk about. Okay, this one here is going to be interesting because we'll start to have collision. Okay, let's see that carefully. Again, let's see the overall picture. The projectile is going to move, and then we're going to do the energy regen for the Starfighter before we try to move. So now we're trying to move from basically from A2 to A3, just 1 unit. That's what we want to do. And then we make the movements, and then, so now I'm not going to mention about update enemy vision anymore because it will remain to be true and false. Okay, but your algorithm or your routine should really still do the calculation. Okay. Okay, I do see something on the chat. Give me 1 moment. And after that, because the move does not preempt the grunt, so that means we have to move on to phase 2 directly. So that'll be regen and also act. And then, okay. Do we move projectiles in order of their IDs? Yes. So Emma's question is, over here, you can see, sometimes you can see the way we sort the projectile is by, oh, I see. Over here, I simply just try to move them together, but according to the instruction here, remember friendly projectile moves first, followed by enemy projectile. So when the for the friendly projectile moves, you should really go with the ID. For example, -1, and then -2, -3, etc. And then when you go to the enemy projectile, you also need to move according to the IDs. So Emma, does that answer your question? Good. All right. All right. So now let's talk about how the movement should go. Okay. So here you can see we got 3 projectiles over here. So the friendly one over here is going to move by 5 units, right? You can see the 5 over here. So now it's going to move basically from 7. Eventually, you want to go to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Eventually, it wants to move to over here. However, it's going to run into this particular enemy projectile. It's also going to collide with this enemy projectile, okay? Just for this very first one, I'm just going to show you how you should program this accordingly. So we're talking about a friendly projectile. So go to phase number 1. When a friendly projectile collides with a enemy projectile, right? So what should we do? Basically, there are 3 cases to consider, right? You have to consider which damage is higher. That's basically what you have to do, all right? But we'll get there, okay? So that's a paragraph you will have to follow, okay? You can see over here, the, okay, let me just see this. So you can see the damage is actually over here. So it's 70 and then 15, 15, okay? So that's the energy. So that means after this, after colliding with this particular one, this will be removed because it got smaller damage. After colliding with this will also be removed because that one there got smaller damage. Okay, that's kind of the rough sketch. So now what you want to really look at is this particular part of the output, right? That's what you have to do. So after this particular phase, let's read it together. It's going to say that friendly projectile with ID -1, which is exactly this one over here, it wants to move from A7 to A12. That's its goal. However, on the way, it's going to collide with enemy projectile at A10. A10 is over here. Also, it's going to collide with A12, also over here, right? Let's see, basically these 2 enemy projectiles, since they got smaller damage, so they will be removed from the board. However, what happened to the damage for the friendly projectile? It's going to be something like this. Remember, we got 15 and 15 over here. That's why the math should be 70 minus 15 minus 15. So you got 40. So after these 2 collisions, you got 40 left for this particular friendly projectile. You can think about the intermediate stage is like this. So basically, this one is gone. This one is gone. So the star will be over here. Over here. Okay? And this one here, at the moment, it actually got 40 as the damage, just 40. Okay, so that's about the projectile movement. That's it. I'm just showing to you the intermediate stage, not the final stage just yet. Okay, so after this, we're going to, after the projectile movement, we're going to move the Starfighter, right? And the Starfighter over this case has no complication. Basically, you simply just move from A2 back to A1. So you can, from A2 to actually A3. So you can see move to A3. So how does the energy should be updated, right? We're going to do something very similar to before. Always you're going to do regen first. So now the current energy will be 62. So 62, apply the regen, 3 is going to be 65. And we only move 1 unit from A2 to A3. So that means if you work out the subtraction, it's going to be 62. So that's about the movement for the Starfighter. All right. So now let's talk about the enemy action, which is going to be interesting. So now for the enemy action over here, since it's move over here, so it's not going to preempt the ground. So that means we are going to move to phase 2 directly. So this is phase 2, right? So that means you're going to apply the regen to the ground. But you can see the ground currently has simply got an energy, simply got a health to the maximum. So applying the 1 for regen is not going to have any effects. Okay, so that's fine. But you should still, conceptually, you should still apply this process. Sometimes it might make a difference. Just not the case for this example here. And then, in order to execute this action over here, what's going to happen is the ground over here is going to move 2 units to the left. Okay, for this one specifically, let me just refer to you again. Let me just go back to enemy. Okay, if you're wondering about why, move to the left. If you go back to the instruction and go to the enemy, oh, actually, I think maybe, let me just go back to the index. Okay, let me go to the enemy over here, and then you can see the ground. Okay, so this is the case that we are talking about, right? The normal action without a preemptive action. So we're going to move 2 spaces to the left and also fire the enemy projectile. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So now we're going to move this ground 2 spaces to the left. Apparently, this is going to collide with this particular intermediate friendly projectile, right? It's going to collide with that. So now, how does the math work? Okay, let me refer you to it. Okay, and I will show you how to do it. You have to go to basically go back to the index of the PDF. And now, please go to for enemy act over here. And then basically we have a collision with the Starfighter. Okay, and then I think somewhere in this particular section over here, it says that for collision, you can simply go to phase number 7. It shows you the collision. So just we're just reusing that description. So now, what if you collide with the Starfighter? Okay, if you collide with the Starfighter, so this is what you have to do the math. But I'll just show you how you can do it. Okay, if you collide with the Starfighter, okay. So now, look at the line over here. I'll make it bigger for you. So you can see the enemy, the ground, collide with the friendly projectile. Sorry, maybe I show you the Starfighter, right? It should be the friendly projectile, but similar math. But notice the formula is different, but the idea is similar. One, you have to apply this. The other one, you have to apply this, right? Just apply the formula in your code. But in this case, we're dealing with friendly projectile. Okay, let me go back. And then, so what we want to see is the ground collide with a friendly projectile, okay? And then at location A12. So A12 is exactly over here, right? So colliding with this. So now the way to do it is this particular friendly projectile got 40 damage. However, the enemy that we are talking about has 1 for their armor value. So you have to offset that. So what's going to happen is, so you can think about the 40 damage over here is going to be offset by the armor value, which is 1. So that means only 39 damage will be cost to the enemy. Okay, so you have to take into consideration the armor value. So that means in total you're going to subtract 39 actually from the health of the enemy, which is 100, right? 100 subtract 39, so that means you're going to get 61 over here. All right, so that's about the enemy action, and then of course you may want to update the enemy vision, but in this case, it's not going to make a difference. All right. So guys, any question about this term?
Sorry, one question. So I guess projectile damage.
Oh, sorry, just give me one moment. I just saw one question on the chat. Let me answer that, and I'll get to you. Bear with me. So after we apply the armor value over here, the armor value remains to be 1. Think about those like attributes. The armor value does not really change in this case. Amir, is that okay? That's your confusion, right? All right, please go ahead. Question.
Yeah, sorry. So I guess because the Starfighter also has an attribute called projectile damage.
Projectile, yeah.
Which has the number of 70.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's not. Yeah, I guess I was just confused because I thought this is how much damage each projectile
Yeah,
or
exactly.
starfighter
So
would cause.
that's correct. So you can think about, since we have chosen a standard weapon over here, so each projectile that the starfighter fire has a particular value over here. In this case, it's simply just 70. Yes. Dimitri, is that your question or?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. All right. Yes, guys, don't worry. I'm recording it. I'm also sharing the notes. Don't worry. Okay. If you feel that you're a little bit lost, I think that's normal because I think I have to go a little bit faster. Otherwise, I cannot finish completely. Okay. Let me finish next two. Okay, we got two more. I think I don't think I will be able to finish AT 015 as well today. So what I can do instead, I think if this will be beneficial, not just for phase 1, but also for phase 2, I'll rather give you the clear picture sooner rather than later. I think tomorrow I will choose another time to just go over another Q&A for your benefits. If you can make it, come. If you cannot, you can just watch the video. Okay, so hopefully no objection about this. And then tomorrow the task will be I'll go over AT 015, which is also kind of long. And also we can go over some more aspects about the game. You can think about the issues I talk about today. You can ask me again tomorrow. All right, so I think for today, I know that it's already 5:30. I'll try to maybe finish 7 and 8 within 10 to 15 minutes. So at least we can make it complete. Okay, hopefully that's the deal. All right, so now we're moving to a new turn. So guys, notice that so far, no enemies have been spawned because we are now falling to the 99%, like no enemy will be spawned, right? Just notice that thing, okay? All right, so now for part number 7, again, we follow a similar flow. Projectile, regen for the starfighter, and then we're gonna move. So this time we are moving from A3 to A1, okay? 2 units, basically. And then move 2 spaces, and then update vision wouldn't make a difference, so I wouldn't mention that, but you should do it still in your program. And then since it's a movement, so the ground will not be preempted, negative, right? Let's see what's gonna happen. Let's now, first of all, do the projectile movement over here. So what's gonna happen is, so we only got 1 projectile, right? You can see just 1 from the previous stage. So we're only moving this guy over here, so it should be to the left by 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it should be over here. So that's why you see over here in the resulting state, right? That's easy. And then that's about a projectile and no collision. So that's an easy case for us. What about you want to do starfighter? Before you can make the movement, you should always do the energy regen and also health regen. Let's see, for the health regen, notice that the health is 70, which is the maximum. So applying the regen for 1 for the health does not have any effects, right? We said that already. So what about the energy? So you can see currently you got 62. And you're going to apply the 3 energy. So that's 62 plus 3. You got 65. So what about the subtract the movement cost? It's going to be 2 units because you're moving from A3 to A1. So 2 units, right? 2 units. So it's going to be 3 times 2. Each move costs 3. So that means you got 59 if you do the math. So that'll be 59. Okay, this part is also straightforward. We have applied this particular formula for many times already. Okay, and then after the movement, you can see that's a final position for the starfighter. And then if you update the enemy vision, it's going to be the same value. It wouldn't change. Okay, true and false. Okay, and then we talk about the ground. And the ground is not going to be preempted by the starfighter. So that means we're going to do, again, phase 2. Okay, just mention that again. So this is phase 2. And what should we do? For phase number 2, we're basically going to think about the enemy projectile, the enemy projectile in the previous phase has already moved to over here, right? So now we simply move this particular guy. Let me just use a different color. We'll move that to the left by 2 spaces. So that will be over here. So that's why you will see that over here, right? That's the movement, right? And then notice that is not only the movement, but also it will fire, it will spawn some projectile right to its left, to its immediate left. So that's why you got a enemy projectile over here, right? So that's about this part here. Okay, this one is not so difficult, given that you have understood from the previous one. What's the meaning of the end of the term? Take a look at over here. 6.13 is the entire term. So this, 6.13 from 1 until 7. So these 7 phases constitute a term. So when I say the end of the term, I meant phase number 7. What do you mean? Is that a question? Does it answer you? Okay, I presume, right? Okay, no, okay. All right, so guys, any question about this final one here? Okay. So Amir has a question over here. Enemy can see Starfighter. Okay, let's see this. You're talking about this guy over here can see Starfighter over here. Okay, you're asking about what if they are not in the same row. Okay, so let's see this, for example. Can the enemy see the Starfighter? Okay, let me just go back here. You can see enemy is over here and Starfighter is over here. They happen to be in the same row, but the vision of the enemy is actually 5. So that's why.
Professor, we can't see the screen.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Let me do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Let me say it again. You can see over here, this attribute can see Starfighter over here. This will should remain to be false, because you can see for this enemy over here, the vision is simply just 5. If you look at the final position for the Starfighter and the enemy, it's between here and here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cutoff points over here. So it's beyond the visible range. So Amir's question was like this: hypothetically, okay, hypothetically, what if the Starfighter is over here in a different turn, in a different row? Should that be visible? It should be visible, because whenever we say distance, it's consistent with how you did it for lab number 3. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So it should be both vertical and horizontal. So either direction is okay. No problem. I think it's really important. All right. So let me just erase this guy here so you don't get confused when you see the notes. All right. So guys, we're done with the part number 7. Let's do the final part. Okay. The final part has a very important trick. Well, like a hidden trick that you have to realize. Okay. Otherwise, you might just get confused. Okay. Finally, we're going to do another movement. Okay. So this time the movement is going to be a wider, longer move. Let's see this. So what I will do is, again, this time here it's going to be just, excuse me, projectile move. I just get rid of the updates on the vision, the 2 attributes over here. I simply just don't talk about these 2 anymore, because if you have to update it, it will just be the same. However, this last part is going to result in a game over. Let's see exactly why. So we'll still do phase number 1 and 2, just to move the projectile, number 1 and 2. And then we'll do the Starfighter. Now we're going to do regen as usual. And then we're going to move the 9 spaces, in this case, because we're moving from A1 to A10. So 9 spaces, right? And then somehow, after doing this stage, the Starfighter already got destroyed, which means the rest of the turn, for example, enemy action simply wouldn't occur anymore. It's simply game over. Okay? Let's see exactly how this can happen. Let's now, first of all, see the projectile movement. Okay, the first one. We got 2 projectiles. We got this one here. We got this one here. Both of them are going to move 4 to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So one of them is going to be here. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of them is going to be over here. Okay, so that's going to be the movement. So you will see that over here in the resulting states. So far it's not the final one, because we're going to get collision in a moment. You can see one of them is going to move from A6 to A2. So A6 to A2. The other one is going from A8 to A4. So A8 to A4. Okay, so that's a movement. So that's a movement part, which is straightforward. Let's now talk about the Starfighter. So first of all, we're going to apply the regen. What about health regen? you can see for the health is already 70. So applying 1 over here has no effects. But we got 59 over here. Applying the 3 is going to give us 62, right? Easy math. And now we're going to subtract the movement. A common mistake you might make is like this. You would think since we are moving from A1 over here to A10, from A1 to A10, A1 to A10, there are actually 9 spaces, right? So you would think when I do the math, I should really say 3 times 9. However, this is only given that the Starfighter does not get destroyed on the way through. Okay, so now this is not the case, right? Because Starfighter destroyed. I'll show you how. Destroyed at location A and 9. Okay, so 9 spaces over here is not the case, right? You got to be careful. Okay, 9 spaces is not the case. Okay, let's see how. So if you look at the line in the output over here, so you will see for the Starfighter over here. Okay, let me make it a bit larger for you. Okay, when the Starfighter move, it's going to move from A1 from here. The target location should be A10. Okay, that's the target location. On its way through, what would it collide with? Well, it's going to collide with this particular enemy projectile. It's going to collide with this particular enemy projectile. It's also going to collide with this particular grunt, the enemy, right? So that's why over here you will see that it's going to collide in the order of occurrence. So you're going to collide with enemy projectile A2, A4, and also A9, right? A2, A4, and also A9. So these are the 3 collisions, okay? Let's now work out the math, okay? So now, when the Starfighter actually collide with an enemy projectile, okay, over here, so you want to think about what's going to be the damage, right? So now the damage over here has to do with, first of all, the damage itself for the projectile. You can see for both of them, for both enemy projectile, their damage are both simply just 15. However, you don't simply just apply 15 because the armor value for the Starfighter has a row. So that's why you got to read the instruction carefully. In many cases, the armor has a row, but in some cases, armor does not have a row. You have to see the instruction, all right? So now in this case, that's why, if I go back here, so that's why this Y is 14, because for their 15 damage, but you're going to subtract the 1, which is armor. So that's why you can see over here for the Starfighter, you start with the 17 as their health. And then you're just going to subtract 14 multiplied by 2, right? So you're going to get 42 left. All right, so once you get a 42, so this is, the 42 is actually after these 2 collisions. And then you're going to collide with another entity, which is grunt, the enemy. In that case, you have to look at what does it really mean. When the Starfighter collide with the enemy, you can look at that section there in the instruction. I can tell you what's going to happen is the Starfighter at the moment, their current health. So this is the current health of the Starfighter, okay? And then what's the current health of the enemy? So if you go back to the enemy over here, so this is the current health of the enemy. Okay, what's going to happen is you're going to subtract the current health of the enemy from the current health of the Starfighter, right? I'm just applying the formula that's set in your instruction. In that case, it's simply just going to be minus 20. So that means the Starfighter get destroyed. But now, this is exactly where I said it could be tricky for you. So you got to be careful, okay? Notice that this is in the location of A9, right? This is the last collision that actually destroyed. Last collision destroying the Starfighter, which means the Starfighter can never make it to the 10. the Starfighter can never make it there. So this is why you can see for the Starfighter, we said it only travel up to A9. So now, how do we work out the math? This is why. So when you go from A1 to A9, because the Starfighter simply get destroyed by A9. So you shouldn't always calculate just by from the start location to the target location, not necessarily. So you got to be careful. So now from A1 to A9, so that'll be 8 spaces. So that means it's going to be A, 3 times 8, and then 62, subtract, you got 38. So this is why you got 38 over here. Okay. So now you update the energy, and you can see the current health simply becomes 0. You don't really put minus 20, by the way. You never put negative number. If that becomes 0 or negative, you always put 0. That means the Starfighter simply get destroyed, and the game is over. Okay. Once the game is over, we don't continue with the current turn anymore. Not really. Okay. So it's as if we simply just stop at the current phase and then say game over. Okay, so that's about the last part. All right, I will pause a little bit to see if we got any question. Before move A10, how much we expect enough energy for this move? If you want to go from A1 to A10, apparently, if you want to do it, of course, you're going to just go from, you just put 9 over here, right? So that's when, if there's no blockage over there. So that would be, so if not destroyed, for example, hypothetically, if not destroyed, it's going to be 62 minus 3 times 9, right? In that case, we will be expecting the energy to be decreased down to 35. So Amir, is that what you meant? But if there's any error messages regarding not enough energy, you will have to look at errors.txt to see if there's such a message there. I'm talking about this case specifically. We don't really apply 9 because the Starfighter simply get destroyed at A9, not really A10. All right. So guys, I think I also got the notes for actually I got scoring, and also I got also the acceptance test AT015. Maybe I should leave these maybe to tomorrow. I have to maybe hold another Q&A for you. I think I want to be slow, and then hopefully that can help you. All right. All right, any other questions? Everybody's okay? All right. Okay, so if that's the case, for tomorrow, for those of you who are, actually, I think maybe I will make it maybe 4 p.m., maybe just the same time. Is everybody okay with that? 4 p.m. tomorrow? All right, very good. Guys, thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. I'm going to make everything available to you. And then you definitely want to start based on what I've covered quite many details already today. Try to look at AT011 again. And then I will talk about scoring. I definitely got some concrete example for you. I just don't want to delay your dinner time. So I will talk about scoring tomorrow. And also I will go over AT015 as well. So hopefully once you study the example more carefully today, you'll be more prepared to follow that tomorrow. All right, I'll send you an announcement to confirm the time. All right, guys, take care. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
If you can make it. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.